The gunshot that shattered the storefront window behind Penelope Lawson wasn't meant for her, but it sent her sprawling into the dirt of Ellsworth's Main Street anyway, her basket of medical supplies scattering across the Kansas prairie dust in the summer heat of 1872. Strong hands gripped her shoulders and hauled her behind a water trough before she could even process what was happening. She found herself staring into the most intense pair of gray eyes she had ever seen, belonging to a tall cowboy whose dark hair fell across his forehead, as he positioned himself between her and the chaos erupting down the street. "Stay down," he commanded, his voice carrying an authority that made her obey instinctively. Another shot rang out, and she watched as he drew his revolver with practiced ease, though he didn't fire. His jaw was set, his attention focused on two men who were now running toward their horses, clearly having decided their robbery attempt at the general store wasn't worth the attention it had attracted. The cowboy waited until they had ridden off in a cloud of dust before holstering his weapon and turning back to her. "Are you hurt, miss?" Penelope took inventory of herself, her heart still hammering against her ribs. Her gray dress was covered in dirt, and her carefully pinned auburn hair had come loose on one side, but she was unharmed. "No, I don't think so. Thank you for your quick thinking, Mr. Dalton Novak," he said, extending his hand to help her up. His grip was firm and warm, and she noticed the calluses that spoke of hard work. "I apologize for the rough handling. Didn't have time for pleasantries." "I'm grateful you didn't," she assured him, brushing off her skirt with shaking hands. "I'm Penelope Lawson. I run the medical practice down the street with my father." Recognition flickered across his features. "Dr. Lawson's daughter. I've heard good things about your work. He's been treating my ranch hands for the better part of 5 years now." Before she could respond, her father came rushing down the wooden sidewalk, his medical bag still in hand. "Penelope, I heard shots. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Papa. Thanks to Mr. Novak here." Her father's weathered face relaxed somewhat as he shook Dalton's hand. "I'm indebted to you, son." "My daughter is all I have left in this world." Dalton's expression softened. "No debt necessary, sir. Just happened to be in the right place, though I am glad I decided to come into town today instead of tomorrow." As the sheriff arrived and began asking questions of the various witnesses, Penelope bent to collect her scattered supplies. Dalton immediately knelt to help her, their hands brushing as they both reached for the same bottle of laudanum. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, and she pulled back quickly, heat rising to her cheeks. "Sorry," they both said simultaneously, then shared an awkward laugh. When the supplies were gathered and order was restored to the street, Dalton tipped his hat to her. "I should let you get back to your day. I'm sure you have patients waiting." "Actually," her father interjected before she could respond, "we were just about to close up for lunch. The least we can do is offer you a meal, Mr. Novak. My daughter makes a fine stew, and I'd like to properly thank the man who saved her life." Penelope shot her father a look. She knew exactly what he was doing. Ever since her mother had died from cholera 2 years ago, he had been not so subtly trying to see her settled. At 24, she was considered past prime marrying age by many in town, but she had been too focused on helping her father with his practice to pay much attention to courting. Dalton hesitated, and she found herself hoping he would accept, even as part of her felt nervous about it. "I wouldn't want to impose." "It's no imposition," she heard herself say. "Papa's right. It's the least we can do." The smile that spread across Dalton's face was warm and genuine. "In that case, I'd be honored." Their home was a modest 2-story building adjacent to the medical practice, and Penelope found herself acutely aware of every detail as she led Dalton inside. She wondered what he saw when he looked around at the simple but clean furnishings. The medical books stacked on every available surface. Her mother's china cabinet that her father couldn't bear to part with. While she prepared the meal, her father and Dalton talked in the sitting room. She could hear Dalton explaining that he had inherited his ranch from his uncle 3 years ago, that he ran cattle and bred horses, that he had come to Ellsworth from Colorado after serving briefly as a lawman there. "Why did you leave law enforcement?" her father asked. There was a pause. "I saw too much death, too much senselessness. A man can only witness so much before it starts eating at his soul. I wanted to build something instead of always chasing destruction." The honesty in his voice made Penelope pause in her stirring. She understood that sentiment more than he knew. Working alongside her father, she had seen her share of death too. Gunshot wounds, accidents, illnesses they couldn't cure. It took a toll. Over lunch, she found herself studying Dalton more carefully. He had strong features, weathered by sun and wind but handsome in a rugged way. He was probably close to 30, she estimated. When he caught her looking, she quickly focused on her bowl, earning an amused smile from him. "Your father tells me you're quite skilled at setting bones," Dalton said. "That you've studied all his medical texts and can diagnose ailments as well as he can." "Papa exaggerates," she said, though she felt pleased by the praise. "But I've been learning from him since I was a girl. Medicine fascinates me." "She has a gift," her father added proudly. "If she were a man, she'd be in medical school. As it is, she's far more capable than most doctors I've known." The bitterness in his tone was familiar. They had fought this battle before. Penelope had wanted to pursue formal medical training, but the barriers for women were nearly insurmountable. Instead, she had contented herself with learning everything she could from her father and the medical journals he subscribed to. "That hardly seems fair," Dalton said quietly. "Talent should matter more than gender." She looked up at him in surprise. Most men in Ellsworth thought her medical aspirations were unnatural at best. "That's a progressive view, Mr. Novak. I've known plenty of incompetent men and plenty of brilliant women," he replied. "My mother ran our family ranch after my father died. Did it better than he ever had, if I'm being honest. She taught me not to underestimate anyone based on arbitrary criteria." Something warm unfurled in Penelope's chest. "Your mother sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was. I lost her 4 years ago to pneumonia." The grief in his voice was still raw. "I would have given anything for a doctor with real skill to treat her. The man we had was a drunk who barely knew which end of a stethoscope to use." "I'm so sorry," Penelope said softly, and meant it. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily. Dalton was well-read despite his practical occupation, and he had strong opinions on everything from local politics to cattle breeding techniques. He made her laugh with stories about his ranch hand's misadventures, and he listened with genuine interest when she talked about her work. When he finally stood to leave, her father extended another invitation. "We have a church social on Saturday evening. Perhaps you'd like to attend, Mr. Novak." I know Penelope would appreciate having someone to talk to besides the church ladies who only want to discuss their ailments. She wanted to sink through the floor at her father's lack of subtlety, but Dalton only smiled. "I'd like that very much, if Miss Lawson wouldn't object." "I wouldn't object at all," she managed to say. After he left, she turned to her father with her hands on her hips. "You're not being remotely subtle." He had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "He's a good man, Penelope. Successful, honest, respectful. And unless I miss my guess, he's quite taken with you." "You don't know that based on one lunch." "I know people," her father said. "And I know that look. Same way I looked at your mother the first time we met." Penelope wanted to protest further, but the truth was she had felt something too. An attraction, yes, but more than that. A sense of recognition, as though she had been waiting to meet Dalton Novak without knowing it. The next few days passed slowly. She threw herself into her work, treating a farmer's broken wrist, helping a woman through a difficult birth, dispensing medicine for various complaints. But her mind kept drifting to Saturday, to seeing Dalton again. When the day finally arrived, she took extra care with her appearance, wearing her best blue dress and pinning her hair up in a more elaborate style than usual. Her father noticed but wisely said nothing, though she caught him smiling. The church social was held in the community hall, with long tables laden with food and people milling about in their Sunday best. Penelope spotted Dalton almost immediately. He stood near the punch bowl, looking slightly uncomfortable in a dark suit that nevertheless fit him well. When he saw her, his face lit up in a way that made her pulse quicken. "Miss Lawson," he said, approaching with something that looked like relief. "I was starting to worry you wouldn't come." "I wouldn't miss it," she replied. "Though I should warn you, you're about to be descended upon by every unmarried woman in town and their mothers. Fresh blood, you understand," he laughed. "Then I better stake my claim on your company before the siege begins." They filled their plates and found a relatively quiet corner to talk. Around them, she was aware of curious glances and whispered conversations. Ellsworth was a small town, and any new development in anyone's personal life was fodder for gossip. "I've been thinking about our conversation," Dalton said after they had been talking for a while. "About your medical knowledge going to waste." "It's not going to waste," she said. "I help Papa every day. But you could do more. What if you had your own practice?" She smiled sadly. "No one would come, a woman doctor. They barely tolerate me assisting my father." "What if you had patients who couldn't afford to be choosy? People who needed help regardless of who provided it?" She set down her fork, intrigued despite herself. "What are you suggesting?" "There's a community of homesteaders about 10 miles from my ranch," Dalton explained. "Hard-working families trying to make a go of it. The nearest doctor is in town here, which means they often go without treatment because they can't spare the time or money for the journey. What if you came out once a week to provide care?" "I couldn't charge them if they can't afford it." "So don't charge them. Or let them pay in goods, services, whatever they can manage. The point is, you'd be practicing medicine on your own terms, building your own reputation." The idea took root in her mind immediately. It was exactly the kind of opportunity she had been craving without knowing how to find it. "Papa would worry." "I'd make sure you got there and back safely," Dalton said. "I go past that area regularly checking on my stock. It wouldn't be any trouble." She studied his face, looking for an ulterior motive but found only sincerity. "Why would you do this for me? You barely know me." He was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes holding hers. "Because in the short time I've known you, I've seen your passion for helping people. Talents like yours shouldn't be wasted because of narrow-minded thinking. And selfishly, I'd like an excuse to spend more time with you." Her heart hammered in her chest. "That's very forward, Mr. Novak." "I know. My mother always said I was too direct for my own good. But I'm 32 years old, Miss Lawson. Too old to play coy games. I like you. I'd like to get to know you better. If that doesn't interest you, tell me now and I'll stop pestering you." She should have been put off by such bluntness. Instead, she found it refreshing. "It interests me," she admitted quietly. "You interest me." The smile he gave her could have lit up the entire room. They spent the rest of the evening together, talking and laughing, oblivious to the speculation swirling around them. When Dalton offered to walk her and her father home, she accepted without hesitation. At her door, with her father having tactfully gone inside, Dalton took her hand gently. "So you'll consider the homesteader idea?" "I'll do more than consider it. I'd like to try it. When can we start? Next Wednesday. I'll come by at dawn with the wagon. She nodded, very aware of his thumb brushing across her knuckles. It's a plan. He hesitated, then lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her fingers that sent warmth flooding through her. Good night, Penelope. Good night, Dalton. She watched him walk away, tall and confident in the moonlight, and felt her life shifting in a new direction. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable pattern. Every Wednesday, Dalton arrived at dawn with his wagon, and they made the journey out to the homesteader community. Penelope brought medical supplies, and Dalton brought his steady presence, and his easy way with people that helped put even the most skeptical patients at ease. The first day, she treated a child's infected cut, helped a pregnant woman with severe morning sickness, and set an elderly man's dislocated shoulder. The families were grateful and humble, offering what they could in payment. She accepted eggs, a jar of preserves, a beautifully carved wooden box. You did good work today, Dalton told her on the ride back. That boy's cut was on its way to blood poisoning. You likely saved his life. Just doing what any doctor would do. Any good doctor, he corrected. You should be proud. She was proud. For the first time, she felt like she was making a real difference on her own terms. Their relationship deepened with each passing week. The long wagon rides gave them hours to talk, to share their histories and dreams and fears. She learned that Dalton had been engaged once, to a woman in Colorado who had broken things off when he decided to leave law enforcement. She wanted the prestige of being a lawman's wife, he explained. When I told her I was done with that life, she made it clear I wasn't what she wanted anymore. That must have hurt. It did. But looking back, I'm grateful. We wanted different things. Better to learn that before the wedding than after. She told him about her own failed courtship, a banker's son who had courted her briefly 2 years ago. He expected me to give up helping Papa once we married, said it wasn't proper for a wife of his to be handling blood and disease. I told him I couldn't do that, and he said I had to choose. So I did. Good for you, Dalton said firmly. Any man who asks you to give up part of yourself isn't worthy of you. These conversations created an intimacy between them that felt both thrilling and terrifying. She found herself thinking about him constantly, looking forward to Wednesdays with an eagerness that had her father teasing her gently. On a warm afternoon in late August, they were heading back from the homesteader community when a wheel on the wagon hit a deep rut. The axle snapped with a sharp crack, and the wagon listed dangerously to one side. Damn, Dalton muttered, pulling the horses to a stop. He jumped down to inspect the damage, and Penelope climbed down to join him. How bad is it? Bad enough. We're not going anywhere on this wheel. I'm going to have to ride back to my ranch for tools and a replacement. It's only about 3 miles from here. I'll come with you. He shook his head. Not enough room for 2 on the horse, not comfortably. You'll be safer waiting here. I'll be back within 2 hours, I promise. She wanted to argue, but he was right. Still, the thought of being alone on the open prairie made her uneasy. There were dangers out here beyond broken wheels. I'll be fine, she assured him, seeing his concern. You have a rifle in the wagon, under the seat. He retrieved it and showed her it was loaded. You know how to use one, Papa taught me. We had to deal with rabid animals a few times. That's my girl. The endearment slipped out naturally, and they both paused. Then Dalton stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. I won't be long. Stay with the wagon. I will. He mounted his horse, looked back at her one more time with an expression she couldn't quite read, then rode off. Penelope settled herself in the shade cast by the tilted wagon, the rifle across her lap. The prairie stretched endlessly around her, golden grass swaying in the breeze. It was actually peaceful, and she found herself relaxing. She must have dozed off, because she woke suddenly to the sound of approaching hoofbeats. But it wasn't Dalton returning. It was three men she didn't recognize, rough-looking and riding hard. They slowed when they saw her, and something in their expressions made her grip the rifle tighter. "Well, well," one of them said, a man with a scarred face and mean eyes. "What do we have here?" "My wagon broke down," Penelope said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My husband will be back any moment." "Don't see no ring on your finger," another man observed. He was younger, with greasy blonde hair and a cruel smile. "And that wagon's been sitting here a while, judging by the tracks." "Looks like you're all alone, sweetheart." They dismounted, and Penelope stood, raising the rifle. "Don't come any closer." The scarred man laughed. "You even know how to use that thing." She cocked it, the sound loud in the quiet afternoon. "Try me." They hesitated, reassessing. She could see them calculating odds, looking at each other. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought they must be able to hear it. "Maybe she's got something worth taking in that wagon," the third man suggested. He was older, with a thick beard. "Medical supplies fetch a good price." They started moving again, fanning out, trying to come at her from different angles. Penelope knew she could maybe get one shot off, but not three. She was trying to decide what to do when a gunshot rang out from behind her. "Next bullet goes into flesh, not air. Step away from her. Now." Dalton's voice was cold and deadly, nothing like the warm tone she was used to. He stood about 20 yards away, his revolver trained on the men. Behind him, she could see two of his ranch hands, both armed. The three men froze. The scarred one raised his hand slowly. "We weren't going to hurt her, just talking." "Funny kind of talking." Three armed men surrounding one woman, one of Dalton's ranch hands said. He was a tall black man with a steady gaze. "Seems to me you boys should move along." They mounted their horses, the scarred man glaring at Dalton. "You're making a mistake." "The only mistake would be you still being here in 10 seconds, Dalton replied. "And I don't miss at this range." They rode off, and Penelope felt her legs go weak. Dalton was at her side immediately, taking the rifle from her trembling hands and pulling her against his chest. "You're all right. You're safe. I've got you." She clutched at his shirt, breathing in the scent of him, letting his solid presence calm her racing heart. "You came back." "I told you I would. When I saw them heading this way, I grabbed Samuel and Bennett and rode hard." He pulled back to look at her face, his hands framing it gently. "Did they touch you? Did they hurt you?" "No, you got here in time." The fear in his eyes transformed into something else, something intense and undeniable. "Penelope, when I saw them surrounding you, when I thought about what could have happened," he stopped, jaw working. "I can't lose you. I know we haven't known each other long, but I can't lose you." "You didn't lose me. I'm right here." He kissed her then, hard and desperate, and she kissed him back with equal fervor. It was nothing like the chaste kisses she had experienced in her previous courtship. This was raw and real, a confirmation that they were both alive and together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel cleared his throat politely. "Boss, we should probably fix that wheel and get the lady home before dark." "Right," Dalton said, not taking his eyes off Penelope. "Right." The ride back was quiet, with Samuel driving the now repaired wagon while Dalton rode beside it on his horse, never letting Penelope out of his sight. Bennett had ridden ahead to tell her father what happened. By the time they arrived in Ellsworth, her father was pacing outside the medical office. He rushed to help her down, checking her over with a doctor's thoroughness. "I'm fine, Papa, truly just shaken." "This is too dangerous," he said. "I shouldn't have let you go out there." "It was just bad luck," Penelope protested. "It won't happen again." "You're damn right it won't," her father said, "because you're not going anymore." "Papa, he's right," Dalton interrupted quietly. She turned to him in shock, feeling betrayed, but his next words surprised her. She shouldn't go without better protection. I'll arrange for armed escorts every time, and maybe we should think about setting up a permanent clinic out there, somewhere secure where people can come instead of her traveling around. Her father considered this. That would be better, but it would take money to establish something like that. I'll provide the money and the land, Dalton said. Consider it an investment in the community. That's too much, Penelope objected. I can't let you do that. Dalton stepped closer, taking her hand in full view of her father and anyone else watching. Yes, you can. Because I love you, Penelope Lawson. I'm in love with you and I want to support your dreams in any way I can. She stared at him, tears suddenly blurring her vision. You love me. I love you. I think I started falling for you the moment I pulled you behind that water trough. And every day since has only made me more certain. I love you too, she whispered. I was so scared today, but not for myself. I was scared I wouldn't get to see you again, that I wouldn't get to tell you how I feel. He cupped her face, his touch infinitely gentle. You never have to be afraid of that. I'm not going anywhere. Her father cleared his throat. As touching as this is, and as much as I approve, perhaps you two could continue this conversation somewhere less public. Penelope looked around and realized they had attracted quite an audience. Several townspeople had stopped to watch, and she knew this would be all over Ellsworth by morning. Papa's right, she said, blushing. Dalton, would you like to stay for dinner? I'd like that very much. Over the meal, they discussed the clinic idea in more practical terms. Dalton owned a good piece of land near the homesteader community, with a small building that could be converted. It would take work, but it was doable. I could come out twice a week instead of once, Penelope suggested. See patients in the clinic and make house calls when necessary. With proper security, her father insisted. With proper security, Dalton agreed. Samuel and Bennett are both trustworthy. They can take turns accompanying her. After dinner, Dalton and Penelope stood on the porch alone. The August night was warm, with stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. I meant what I said earlier, Dalton told her. About loving you, and I know it's fast, but I'm not a young man with time to waste. I want to marry you, Penelope. I want to build a life with you. But I also want you to have your clinic and your practice. I'll never ask you to choose between me and your calling. She took his hands in hers. Are you proposing, Dalton Novak? Not yet. I think you deserve a proper proposal with a ring and some romance, but I'm telling you my intentions. If that scares you off, better to know now. It doesn't scare me off, she said softly. It makes me love you even more, but I have to be honest with you. I'm afraid, Dalton. I'm afraid of failing you, of not being the wife you need while also being the doctor I want to be. I've seen women give up everything for marriage, become shadows of themselves. I don't want that to happen to me, and I don't want you to resent me for trying to avoid it. He was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. Then he pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. Penelope, failure is impossible when we're together, don't you see? We're not two separate people trying to compromise until we're both diminished. We're partners, each making the other stronger. Your success is my success. Your happiness is my happiness. I don't want a shadow wife. I want you, exactly as you are, dreams and ambitions and stubborn independence included. Tears spilled down her cheeks. How did I get so lucky to find you? I ask myself the same question every day, he said, then kissed her tenderly. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. The clinic took shape with surprising speed, thanks to Dalton's resources and determination. He hired carpenters to renovate the building, install proper medical equipment, build examination rooms and a dispensary. Penelope threw herself into ordering supplies, organizing the space, and spreading word throughout the homesteader community about the new clinic. The response was overwhelming. People were desperate for accessible medical care. She and Dalton spent most of their free time together, and she was constantly discovering new reasons to love him. The way he treated everyone with respect, from the wealthiest rancher to the poorest homesteader. His dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. His patience when she got absorbed in her medical texts and lost track of time. He proposed in October, during a sunset ride out to check on the clinic's progress. They stood on a hill overlooking the prairie, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink, and he got down on one knee with a simple gold band. "Penelope Lawson, you've made me happier than I ever thought possible. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she said, not even needing to think about it. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slid the ring on her finger, then stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed with pure joy. They were married in late November in Ellsworth's small church, with most of the town in attendance. Her father walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, and Dalton waited at the altar looking at her as though she were the most precious thing in the world. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When it came time for vows, Dalton took her hands and spoke from the heart. "Penelope, I promise to support your dreams as fiercely as I support you. I promise to never ask you to be anything less than who you are. I promise to be your partner in all things through whatever challenges come. And I promise to love you for the rest of my days." She had to blink back tears as she said her own vows. "Dalton, I promise to build a life with you that honors both of us. I promise to be your wife, your partner, and your greatest champion. I promise to love you through good times and hard times, in sickness and in health. And I promise that together, we'll make everything possible." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Dalton kissed her to enthusiastic applause. The reception was held in the community hall, with food and dancing and celebration that lasted well into the night. But eventually, Dalton swept her away to his ranch, their ranch now, where they would begin their married life. The ranch house was larger than she had expected, a solid 2-story building with room to grow. Dalton had clearly made an effort to prepare for her arrival. Fresh curtains hung in the windows, flowers sat on the kitchen table, and their bedroom was warm and welcoming. "Welcome home, Mrs. Novak," he said, carrying her over the threshold. "It feels like a dream," she admitted. "A wonderful dream." "It's real," he assured her, setting her down gently. "And it's ours." That first night as husband and wife was everything she could have hoped for, tender and passionate and full of whispered promises. Dalton was patient and attentive, making sure she felt cherished and desired. When they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, Penelope felt completely at peace. The next morning, she woke to find Dalton already up, making breakfast. She joined him in the kitchen, wearing his shirt, and he pulled her close for a long kiss. "Good morning, wife." "Good morning, husband." They ate together, discussing their plans for the day. The clinic was set to open in 2 weeks, and there was still much to do. Her father would be joining her there 2 days a week while maintaining his practice in town the rest of the time. "I've been thinking," Dalton said, "about the clinic. You're going to need help, someone to assist you and keep things running smoothly when you're seeing patients. I was planning to do it myself initially. I know, but you're going to be overwhelmed quickly. What if we hired someone? There's a woman, Mary Thompson, who lives near the clinic. She's smart, capable, lost her husband last year and is struggling to make ends meet. I think she'd be perfect." Penelope considered this. Having an assistant would be invaluable, and she liked the idea of helping another woman in need. "Let's meet with her." Mary Thompson turned out to be an excellent choice. She was in her early 30s, practical and quick to learn, grateful for the opportunity. Within days of the clinic opening, she had become indispensable. The clinic itself exceeded all of Penelope's expectations. Patients came from miles around, homesteaders and ranch hands and farmers' families. She treated everything from broken bones to pneumonia to difficult childbirths. Her father worked alongside her, clearly proud of what she had built, but it wasn't without challenges. Some people, particularly older men, were skeptical of being treated by a woman. She won them over with competence and care, but it required constant proof of her abilities. One cold December day, a man was brought in with a gunshot wound to the shoulder. He was bleeding badly, delirious with pain. His friends who carried him in took one look at Penelope and demanded to see the real doctor. "I am the real doctor," she said calmly, "and your friend is going to die if I don't get that bullet out soon." "No woman's cutting into him," one of them insisted. Her father stepped forward. "My daughter is the best surgeon I know. You want him to live, you let her work. Otherwise, take him on to the next town and see if he survives the journey." The men looked at each other, then at their friend who was rapidly losing consciousness. Finally, they stepped aside. Penelope worked quickly and efficiently, removing the bullet, cleaning the wound, stitching him up with neat, precise sutures. The entire procedure took less than 30 minutes. When she was done, the man was stable, his bleeding stopped. "He'll need to rest for several weeks," she told his friends. "Keep the wound clean, change the dressing daily. I'll check on him in a few days." One of the men, shame-faced, nodded. "We were wrong to doubt you, madam. Thank you for saving his life." It was a small victory, but it felt significant. That evening she returned to the ranch exhausted but satisfied. Dalton met her at the door, taking her medical bag and pulling her into an embrace. Long day, very long, but good. She told him about the gunshot patient, about proving herself yet again. "They'll learn," Dalton said. "Everyone will learn what I already know, that you're exceptional." She leaned into him, drawing strength from his support. This was what she had been afraid of losing by marrying, but Dalton had been true to his word. He celebrated her successes, supported her through challenges, never once suggested she should scale back her work. Their first Christmas together was quiet and perfect. They spent Christmas Eve at the ranch, decorating a small pine tree that Dalton had cut himself. He gave her a leather medical bag with her initials embossed on it, and she gave him a new Stetson hat that she had saved up for. On Christmas Day, they went into town to spend time with her father, then returned to the homesteader community to deliver gifts to the families there. It had been Dalton's idea, gathering donations from various ranchers and townspeople to provide food, clothing, and toys for those struggling. "You're a good man, Dalton Novak," Penelope told him as they drove home through the snow. "I'm just following your example," he replied. "You've taught me a lot about generosity this past year." As winter deepened into the harsh Kansas cold, they settled into married life. Penelope maintained her clinic schedule while Dalton managed the ranch. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, she with her medical journals and he with his ranch records, content in each other's presence. Their first real argument came in February, when Penelope insisted on traveling to the clinic during a blizzard because a woman was in labor. "It's too dangerous," Dalton said. "The roads are impassable. She needs me. First babies can be complicated. Send word for her to come here. We can set up a room for her. She's 8 months pregnant and already in labor. She can't travel any more than I can." They stood facing each other, both stubborn, both worried. Finally, Dalton sighed. "If you're going, I'm going with you, and we take Samuel too. 3 of us on horseback, roped together so nobody gets lost." It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a compromise. The journey was brutal, the wind howling and snow blinding them. But they made it, and Penelope successfully delivered a healthy baby boy while Dalton and Samuel waited anxiously in the other room. On the way back, Dalton held her close on his horse, keeping her warm. "Don't ever scare me like that again." "I'll try not to, but you know I can't promise that." "People need me, Dalton. That won't change." "I know," he said quietly. "I married a healer." "I knew what that meant. Doesn't mean I don't worry. I worry about you too. Every time you break a wild horse, every time there's talk of cattle rustlers in the area. But I trust you to be careful, and I need you to trust me the same way." He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "You're right. I do trust you. I just love you so much that the thought of losing you terrifies me." "We're going to have a long life together," she assured him. "I'm not going anywhere." Spring brought new life to the prairie and new challenges to the clinic. An outbreak of measles swept through the homesteader community, and Penelope worked 18-hour days trying to treat patients and prevent the disease from spreading. Dalton brought her meals and fresh supplies, helped organize quarantine areas, did whatever he could to support her efforts. Her father came out to help, and together they managed to get the outbreak under control, though sadly they lost 2 children despite their best efforts. Penelope took those losses hard. She stood in the cemetery as the small coffins were lowered into the ground, tears streaming down her face. Dalton stood beside her, his arm around her waist, letting her grieve. "I should have saved them," she said that night, lying in their bed. "I should have done more." "You did everything possible," Dalton replied gently. "You saved a dozen other children. Without you, the death toll would have been much higher. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does when you lose someone, but you can't save everyone, Penelope. You're brilliant and dedicated, but you're not God. All you can do is your best, and your best is extraordinary." She turned to face him, seeing the love and conviction in his eyes. "What did I do to deserve you? You pulled me behind a water trough," he said with a small smile. "Best day of my life." That made her laugh despite her grief, and she kissed him, grateful beyond words for his presence in her life. By summer, the clinic was well established and respected throughout the region. Penelope's reputation had grown, and people came from increasingly long distances to seek her care. Her father had cut back his practice in town, spending most of his time at the clinic with her. "I'm proud of you," he told her one afternoon. "Your mother would be proud too." "I wish she could have met Dalton. She would have loved him. He's exactly the kind of man she hoped you'd find. Someone who sees your strength as an asset, not a threat." In August, Penelope began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited a few weeks to be certain before telling Dalton, wanting to be absolutely sure. When she finally confirmed it, she chose a special evening to share the news. She prepared his favorite meal, set the table with candles, and put on the blue dress he loved. When he came in from working with the horses, he immediately knew something was different. "What's the occasion?" he asked, looking around at the preparations. "Sit down," she said, suddenly nervous. They had talked about children, but abstractly, as something for the future. This made it immediate and real. He sat, concern crossing his face. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect. Dalton, I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." For a moment, he just stared at her. Then his face split into the widest smile she had ever seen. He stood and crossed to her in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms and spinning her around. "A baby. We're really having a baby. In about 6 months, yes." He set her down carefully, as though she might break, and placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "I'm going to be a father." "Are you happy?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it. I'm thrilled. Terrified, but thrilled." He looked at her with sudden concern. "The clinic, the long hours, is it safe for you to keep working?" "I'll be careful, and I'll cut back as I get further along." "But yes, Women have been working through pregnancies since the beginning of time. I'll be fine. He nodded, clearly trying to adjust to this new reality. We should tell your father. He's going to be over the moon about becoming a grandfather. They rode into town that evening to share the news. Her father was indeed thrilled, hugging her tightly and shaking Dalton's hand with enthusiasm. I'm going to spoil this child rotten, he declared. Fair warning. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Penelope continued working at the clinic, though she did reduce her hours as Dalton had requested. She trained Mary more extensively, preparing her to take on more responsibilities when the baby came. Dalton was attentive to the point of being overprotective. He worried about her riding horses, worried about her exposure to illness at the clinic, worried about everything. She found it both endearing and occasionally frustrating. I'm pregnant, not made of glass, she reminded him more than once. I know. I just want you both to be safe. As her belly grew, she found herself marveling at the life growing inside her. She had brought so many babies into the world, but experiencing pregnancy firsthand was entirely different. Dalton would talk to her belly every night, telling their unborn child about the ranch, about their life, about how loved they already were. In February, during a particularly cold night, Penelope woke with the first contractions. She lay quietly for a few minutes, timing them before gently shaking Dalton awake. It's time. He was instantly alert. Time, the baby, now. Now, she confirmed, breathing through another contraction. He jumped up, moving with slightly panicked efficiency. I'll get your father, I'll get Mary. I'll Dalton, she said calmly. Breathe, we have time. First babies take a while. Send word to Papa, but don't wake up the whole county. He sent Samuel riding for her father, then returned to pace their bedroom while Penelope worked through the early contractions. Her father arrived within the hour, and Mary came shortly after, ready to assist. Labor was long and difficult, lasting well into the next day. Dalton stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, offering encouragement even when she snapped at him in pain. I know it hurts, he said during a particularly hard contraction. But you're the strongest person I know. You can do this. Easy for you to say, she gasped. You're not the one pushing a human being out of your body. Fair point, he conceded, making her laugh despite the pain. Finally, as the sun was setting, their son was born. He came into the world wailing and red-faced and absolutely perfect. Her father placed the baby on Penelope's chest, and she looked down at him in wonder. Hello, little one, she whispered. Dalton leaned in, his eyes wet with tears. He's beautiful. You're amazing. Thank you. They named him Daniel Peter Novak, honoring Dalton's father and hers. Daniel had dark hair like his father and his mother's nose, and from the very beginning, he had a healthy set of lungs. The first weeks were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Penelope was surprised by how much she loved being a mother, even as she mourned the temporary loss of her work at the clinic. Dalton was a natural father, patient and gentle with their son, happy to walk the floor at night when Daniel was fussy. I thought I might resent stepping back from the clinic, Penelope admitted one night as she nursed Daniel. But I don't, not yet anyway. I'm exactly where I want to be. You're allowed to want both, Dalton said, to love being his mother and still want your work. When you're ready, we'll figure out how to balance it. And they did. When Daniel was 3 months old, Penelope began going to the clinic 2 days a week, bringing the baby with her. Mary was delighted to help watch him between patients, and Daniel seemed to enjoy the activity and attention. As he grew, Daniel became the light of their lives. He had his father's easy smile and his mother's curious nature. The ranch hands doted on him, and her father spent every free moment with his grandson. When Daniel was 2, Penelope found herself pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and she was able to plan better for her absence from the clinic. Their daughter, Margaret Ann, was born in the spring of 1876, an easier birth than her brother's had been. Margaret had auburn hair like her mother and gray eyes like her father, and where Daniel was boisterous and active, Margaret was contemplative and gentle. Dalton loved having a daughter, declaring that she had him wrapped around her tiny finger from day one. Life fell into a rich pattern. Penelope worked at the clinic 3 days a week now, with her father taking the other days. Mary had become skilled enough to handle minor cases on her own. The children grew healthy and loved, spending their days on the ranch learning and exploring. "You ever regret it?" Dalton asked one evening when the children were asleep and they sat on their porch watching the sunset. Giving up the chance to be a full-time doctor, Penelope considered the question seriously. "No, because I haven't given it up. I've adapted it. I still practice medicine, still help people. But I also have this beautiful family, this full life. Maybe it's not the path I imagined when I was younger, but it's better, because it's real and it's mine and I chose it." "We chose it," Dalton corrected. "Together." "Together," she agreed, leaning against him. When Daniel was 6 and Margaret was 4, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2. She was older now, at 34, and she felt every ache and pain more acutely. "Maybe this is our last one," she told Dalton. "I love our children, but I'm not sure I want to do this again at 35. "Whatever you want," he assured her. 2 children, 3 children, 10 children. I'm happy as long as you're happy and healthy." Their 3rd child, a son they named Thomas Henry, was born in the winter of 1880. The birth was difficult, and for a few frightening hours, her father worried about complications. But both Penelope and the baby pulled through, and Thomas proved to be a happy, easy baby who slept well and smiled often. With 3 children, the house was full of noise and love and chaos. Dalton expanded the ranch house, adding more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Penelope cut back her clinic hours to 2 days a week, focusing more on training others to carry on the work. Daniel showed an early aptitude for ranching, following his father around and asking endless questions about horses and cattle. Margaret was fascinated by her mother's medical work, begging to come to the clinic and watch. Thomas was still too young to show clear interests, but he was adventurous and fearless, keeping everyone on their toes. "I think Margaret is going to follow in your footsteps," Dalton observed one day when their daughter was carefully bandaging her doll's injured arm. "Maybe," Penelope said, watching her daughter with pride. "And maybe by the time she's grown, it will be easier for women in medicine." "It will be," Dalton said confidently, "because of women like you who refuse to accept limitations." As the years passed, their life together deepened and strengthened. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated good harvests and successful cattle drives. The clinic continued to serve the community, now with 2 younger doctors working alongside Penelope and her father. Her father began to slow down in his early 70s, and Penelope felt grateful for every day she still had with him. He loved being around his grandchildren, telling them stories about their mother as a young girl, teaching them to appreciate the value of helping others. He passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1885, with Penelope holding his hand. The whole town turned out for his funeral, testimony to how many lives he had touched. Penelope grieved deeply, but found comfort in knowing he had lived a full life and died knowing she was happy. "He was so proud of you," Dalton told her as they stood at the grave. "He told me once that his greatest achievement was raising you to be exactly who you wanted to be." "I was lucky to have him," she said through tears, "and lucky to have you." The children grew and flourished. Daniel became a skilled rancher, working alongside his father and showing natural leadership abilities. Margaret did indeed pursue medicine, becoming Penelope's apprentice, and showing even more natural talent than her mother had at that age. Thomas developed a gift for breeding horses, turning that into a profitable side business for the ranch. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Dalton surprised Penelope with a trip back to Ellsworth, to the spot where they had first met. 20 years ago, I pulled a terrified woman behind a water trough, he said as they stood on the street, now much more developed than it had been then. And my life changed forever. Mine too, Penelope said, taking his hand. You gave me everything, Dalton. Love, partnership, a family, the freedom to be myself. We gave each other everything, he corrected. Remember what I told you once. Failure is impossible when we're together. I still believe that, every single day. She looked at him, this man who had kept every promise, who had supported every dream, who had loved her unconditionally for 2 decades. I believe it too, and I'm grateful for every moment. He pulled her close and kissed her, there on the street where their story had begun, and Penelope felt the same spark, the same rightness she had felt that first day. They returned to the ranch to find their children had prepared a celebration. The house was decorated, food was prepared, and half the county seemed to be there to celebrate with them. Happy anniversary, Margaret said, hugging her mother. Thank you for showing me what love should look like. Thank you for teaching me that a woman can have everything she dreams of, Daniel added. Even young Thomas, now 14, gave a rare, serious speech. You two are the best parents anyone could ask for. I hope I find something half as good as what you have. That night, after everyone had left and the children were asleep, Penelope and Dalton sat on their porch as they had countless times before. Can you believe it's been 20 years? Penelope asked. Some days it feels like yesterday. Other days it feels like I've known you forever. Dalton reached for her hand. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Every moment, every challenge, every joy. Even the parts where I was stubborn and impossible, especially those parts. You wouldn't be you without that fire. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Their life hadn't been perfect. They had faced struggles, made mistakes, had disagreements and difficult times. But through it all, they had chosen each other, supported each other, loved each other. Do you remember what I said that night? Penelope asked. When you first told me you loved me, you said you were afraid of failing me. I was terrified that I couldn't be everything I wanted to be and everything you needed. Dalton pulled her closer. And what did I tell you? That failure is impossible when we're together. I was right, wasn't I? She laughed, kissing him softly. You were absolutely right. The years continued to roll by. Margaret left for medical school in the East, one of the first classes to accept women, making her mother incredibly proud. She returned 5 years later as a licensed physician and took over the clinic entirely, expanding it into a small hospital. Daniel married a rancher's daughter and built his own house on the property, taking over more and more of the ranch operations as Dalton slowly stepped back. Thomas started a horse breeding program that gained regional fame. Penelope and Dalton became grandparents multiple times over, and they loved watching their grandchildren grow and thrive. They took pride in knowing they had built something lasting, not just in terms of property and business, but in terms of family and values. On their 30th anniversary, they returned once more to Ellsworth. The town had grown considerably, with paved streets and electric lights now. But the old church where they had married still stood, and they went inside to sit in the same pew where they had spoken their vows. 30 years, Penelope marveled. Where did the time go? Into building a life, Dalton replied. He was older now, his dark hair thoroughly gray, lines deepening around his eyes. But to Penelope, he was still the most handsome man she had ever known. "I love you," she said simply. "I've loved you for 30 years, and I'll love you for 30 more if we're blessed with them. I love you too. You've been my partner, my best friend, my greatest adventure." He took both her hands. "I know I say this every anniversary, but I need you to know. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You gave me more than I ever dared to dream of. You gave me the freedom to be everything I wanted to be," Penelope replied. "Not many men in your generation would have done that. You're extraordinary, Dalton Novak." They sat together in the quiet church, remembering their wedding day, remembering all the days that had followed. The joys and sorrows, the triumphs and setbacks, the ordinary moments that had woven together to create a beautiful life. As they walked out into the sunlight, Dalton pulled her close. "Ready for the next 30 years. With you, always." They returned home to find another celebration waiting, this one even larger than the last. Their children and grandchildren, ranch hands current and retired, patients Penelope had treated over the years, friends from town and the surrounding communities. All had come to celebrate a marriage that had become legendary in the region. Margaret stood to give a toast. "To my parents, who taught me that love isn't about sacrifice or compromise. It's about finding someone who helps you become more fully yourself. Someone who celebrates your strengths and supports you through your weaknesses. Someone who makes you braver, stronger, better. Thank you for showing me what that looks like." As the celebration continued around them, Penelope leaned against Dalton, feeling profoundly grateful. She thought about that frightened young woman who had worried about failing the man she loved. That woman couldn't have imagined all of this. The depth of love, the richness of partnership, the joy of building something together. "What are you thinking about?" Dalton asked quietly. "About how wrong I was," she replied. "That day I told you I was afraid of failing you. I didn't understand yet that we weren't going to fail because we were never going to stop choosing each other." "Every single day," Dalton agreed. "I chose you every single day, and I chose you." As the sun set over the Kansas prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Penelope and Dalton stood together, surrounded by the life they had built. 3 children, 8 grandchildren, a thriving ranch, a successful medical practice that had helped thousands, and a love that had only deepened with time. They had faced everything together: danger, loss, hardship, joy. They had supported each other's dreams, compromised when necessary, stood firm when important. They had raised children to be good people, built businesses that served their community, and loved each other through it all. "No regrets?" Dalton asked, as he had asked so many times before. "Not a single one," Penelope answered, as she always did, because it was true. Their life together hadn't been perfect, but it had been perfectly theirs. They had taken a chance on each other that day in Ellsworth, a doctor's daughter and a cowboy rancher, and they had built something extraordinary. That night, in their bedroom in the house they had shared for 30 years, Dalton held Penelope close. "You remember the first night we spent here?" he asked. "After our wedding, I remember being nervous and excited and absolutely certain I had made the right choice. I felt the same way, and I've felt that way every day since." She turned to face him, tracing the beloved lines of his face. "We did it, didn't we? We built the life we wanted, together. We did. And we're not done yet, we still have years ahead of us." "Years of what?" she asked with a smile. "Years of loving each other. Years of watching our family grow. Years of sitting on our porch and watching sunsets. Years of proving that failure truly is impossible when we're together." Penelope kissed him, a kiss that held 30 years of love and the promise of many more to come. "I like the sound of that." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had countless nights before, secure in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious. A partnership built on mutual respect, unwavering support, and deep, abiding love. The years ahead would bring more challenges and more joys. They would celebrate more anniversaries, welcome more grandchildren, and eventually, great-grandchildren. Dalton would continue to run the ranch with Daniel until he finally retired completely at 70, content to let his son take full control. Penelope would work at the hospital part-time until she was nearly 70 herself, unable to fully give up the practice of medicine that had been her calling. They would sit on their porch and tell their grandchildren stories about the old days, about a time when Kansas was still being settled, when medical care was scarce, when a young woman with dreams of being a doctor seemed impossible. But Grandma did it anyway, they would say. Because Grandpa believed in her. And because Grandma was stubborn, Dalton would add with a wink, earning a playful swat from Penelope. I prefer determined, she would insist. They would watch the prairie turn from green to gold with the seasons, watch storms roll in across the endless sky, watch their family grow and prosper on the land they had worked so hard to build something on. And every night, before they went to sleep, Dalton would tell Penelope he loved her, and she would say it back, neither of them ever taking for granted the gift they had been given. The gift of finding each other, of building a life together, of proving that when two people truly support and love each other, anything is possible. Their story became the stuff of local legend. The cowboy and the doctor, people would say, started a medical practice that became a hospital, raised 3 successful children, built one of the most respected ranches in Kansas, and loved each other through 40, then 50 years of marriage when they finally passed. Within months of each other, as old couples sometimes do, the funeral drew people from across the state. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren mourned them deeply, but also celebrated the extraordinary life they had lived. Margaret, in her eulogy, told the story of how they had met, of the gunfight in Ellsworth, of her father pulling her mother to safety, of the love that had bloomed so quickly and lasted so long. My mother once told my father she was afraid of failing him, Margaret said to the assembled crowd. And he told her that failure was impossible when they were together. They proved that truth every single day for over 50 years. They built a life of love, service, and partnership that serves as an example for all of us. Their legacy lives on not just in this ranch, not just in the hospital my mother founded, but in every person they touched, every life they improved, every moment they chose each other. As Margaret spoke, Daniel stood with his arm around his youngest son, thinking about everything his parents had taught him, about love and respect and the importance of supporting your partner's dreams. He had tried to live by those lessons in his own marriage, and he hoped his children would do the same. Thomas, standing nearby with his own large family, felt the same. His parents had given him a blueprint for what marriage should be, not perfect but real. Not without struggle, but always with commitment. Not taking the easy path, but taking it together. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren listened to stories about Penelope and Dalton that day, about their adventures and their love and their unwavering support of each other. These stories would be passed down through generations, a reminder that real love is both fierce and gentle, both challenging and comforting, both a choice and a destiny. Penelope and Dalton were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple headstone that read, "Together in life, together in death, together in everything. Beloved parents, grandparents, and partners, their love made everything possible." And on quiet evenings when the wind blew across the Kansas prairie, if you listened carefully, you might almost hear the echo of their laughter, the whisper of their conversations, the enduring presence of a love that had shaped not just two lives, but an entire family, an entire community, an entire legacy. Because that was the truth Penelope and Dalton had discovered and lived every day. That when two people truly commit to each other, when they support each other's dreams and stand together through challenges, when they choose love over and over again, failure truly is impossible. Their story wasn't just about a cowboy and a doctor falling in love in the Wild West. It was about the power of partnership, the strength of mutual respect, and the transformative nature of a love that uplifts rather than constrains. It was about a woman who refused to give up her dreams and a man who celebrated her for it. About children who grew up seeing what real love looked like. About a community that was better because two people had found each other and built something beautiful together. It was, in the end, about the simple but profound truth that the best love stories aren't about perfect people or perfect circumstances. They're about real people who choose each other, day after day, through everything life brings. People who understand that together, they can weather any storm, achieve any goal, and build a life beyond what either could have imagined alone. Penelope and Dalton's love story began with a gunshot and a water trough in Ellsworth, Kansas in 1872. But it never really ended. It lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the hospital that still served the community, in the ranch that still flourished under family management, in the countless lives they had touched throughout their years together. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Penelope and Dalton were together still, proving once again that failure is impossible when you're together, that love can overcome any obstacle, and that the greatest adventure is finding someone who helps you become everything you were meant to be while loving you exactly as you are. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their love eternal. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask for? The prairie wind still blows across Kansas, carrying with it the legacy of a cowboy and a doctor who found each other against all odds and built something that would last far beyond their years. Their story serves as a reminder that the best things in life are worth fighting for, that real partnership requires both people to bring their full selves, and that when you find the right person, everything truly is possible. This was their story. A love story, yes, but more than that. A story about courage and commitment, about dreams and determination, about two people who refused to accept the limitations others placed on them, and instead built a life that honored both of their truths. It was a story that began with fear and ended with certainty. A story that started with doubt and concluded with absolute faith. A story that proved, beyond any question, that failure is impossible when we're together. And so, under the vast Kansas sky, with the wind whispering through the prairie grass and the stars shining overhead, the story of Penelope and Dalton came to its natural, beautiful end. Not with sadness, but with gratitude. Not with regret, but with satisfaction. Not with an ending, but with a legacy that would endure. They had lived. They had loved. They had built something extraordinary together. And in doing so, they had proven that the right partnership can make anything possible, that love is strongest when it empowers rather than limits, and that together, truly together, failure is impossible. Their story was complete.